Roll 'em.
My name is Ben Kibort. I was born in Shoah, Lithuania on December 26, 1926.
What are some of your early memories?
Well, I remember very well the teachers from our schools. As a matter of fact, I remember the teacher from kindergarten. She's still in Israel, by the name of Hoffenberg, a wonderful person. And the things that I remember from home, we had a very lovely home, and we used to play a lot with children on the block. And from then on, it was like first grade and second grade, and I had some very fine friends that I enjoyed being with. And we were kind of close. People were, in those days, and I think in our community especially, very close. We knew of each other. We knew not only the kids from school, but their families. We used to hang around in their houses all the time. And it meant a lot to us. It was a great relationship. And,
All Jewish or non-Jewish?
I would say 100% Jewish, yes. And I attended a private Hebrew parochial school, and so there definitely was all Jewish kids, and everything was in Hebrew. And the classes in those days, when we had finals, especially in the sixth grade, it had to be checked out by the Lithuanians. They didn't trust the private schools, so we had to take exams in order to get through with our schooling.
In Lithuania?
Yeah, in Lithuania, yes. And so I then when I was about 5, 6, 7, we had some like a JCC. It was called a Maccabi, and that's where kids used to hang around all the time. We played a lot of basketball, we played a lot of ping pong, and we had all kinds of sessions. Also from our home life, I remember that every summer during our vacation years, my mother and Leo, my brother Leo, we used to go for summer vacation to visit our grandpa and grandma. And it was a very little town, and my grandfather had a store in the little town, and I used to enjoy going into the store and helping him, wrap up packages and doing things. And he used to say, "Boy, that guy's going to be a businessman." And also, my grandfather, he was a pretty well-to-do man at one time. They owned a factory where they made brushes, and some of his brothers and relatives, they did not do so well, and they wanted to go to America, and he's the one that bought them the tickets to go to America. And this is how the whole thing happened, and that we ended up in Minneapolis because of those relatives. They remembered the good things that he did for them, and he paid for the tickets for them to go to the United States. And they, in the later days when he got to be old, they used to send him a check every single month of $50, and with that money he survived. And I remember going to the post office in the little town during my vacation, during my school vacation, and to get a check for him, cashed it, and this is how he survived.
Do you remember what the little town's name was?
Crozai.
Crozai?
Yeah,
And
Croz. And it was a very small town with just maybe a dozen of Jewish families. But I always enjoyed being in this little town. It was so Jewish, and so with the old type synagogue, And matter of fact, that's where I was a little boy. That's where I learned to swim. They had a little lake in the town, and to me it was very exciting. I kind of looked forward to it every year.
These were your mother's parents?
Those were my mother's parents.
And what were their names?
Well, my grandfather's name was Falk Moses. My mother was a Moses, and her mother was Hinda Moses. Her maiden name was Hinda Edelman. As a matter of fact, I have a picture here that we found when we came to the United States. Our relatives had that picture that was sent to them. I must have been here about maybe 8 years old. And there's my brother Leo. And in the middle, my grandfather, Falk. And my mother. And my grandma. That's me.
And how old were you there?
Oh, I must have been here about, I would say about maybe 8.
Looks just like Aaron.
Huh?
Looks just like Aaron.
And here's a picture of my father, Oliver Shoah.
And what were your parents' names?
My father's name was Kalman, and my mother's name was Sarah. I also have a picture. Am I going too fast?
No, you're all right.
I also have a picture here of our house in Lithuania, and with a bunch of my very close friends.
Here, you gotta hold it still.
And what are their names?
Well, two of them, one of them is Yankelevich, he's in Israel, and the other one is Cher, and he's in New York. And the other three, that's me on the left side, and then the other two, they did not survive.
What were their names?
One was Schmild, and the other one was the Kamalkovsky. And neither one of them survived.
So you remember your mother's parents. Do you remember your father's parents?
Sure do. My grandpa, my father's father, his name was Nochum, Kibort, naturally, and my grandma was Sheva, and her maiden name was Shane. And I do remember my grandparents. Yes, we used to spend quite a bit of time and have some wonderful times at their home.
Did they live in Shoah?
Yes, they were in Shoah, and they were supported in their. When they got older, they were helped, supported by the children, by my father and my uncle. There were 8 children in the family. I only knew 4 of them, because the other 4 were in Russia. They all married. They all were married, and they were in different cities in Russia. And as I understand, there were some pretty well-educated people. Like the children were doctors, but I did not know them. The only one I knew was my uncle Yitzchak. And my uncle Leo.
You had an Uncle Leo.
Right. And an auntie. I had 3 aunties. One was Bela, one was Fania, and Helen. They were married, and they lived in small communities around the city of Kovna. And my auntie Bela was single. Okay, now getting a little bit with my parents. My father owned a store in Shoah, Lithuania, and there were several Jewish families that owned stores, and we were, I would say, kind of upper middle class, pretty well to do. My father had a store that was a leather and things for shoemakers. In other words, like shoemaker equipment. And being that he had a leather store, because see, in Lithuania, it was mostly agriculture and leather factories. And the Jewish people in Shoah were pretty well to do. Most of them were pretty well to do. And a matter of fact, I don't want to brag, but the Lithuanian Jewry were considered the elite of the European Jewry, because most of them were well educated. There were excellent schools, yeshivas, like you heard about the Kovna Yeshiva and the Vilna Yeshiva and the Telzer Yeshiva, and some very fine rabbis came out of the Lithuanian yeshivas. So we are really proud of it. And
How did your parents meet?
my parents were introduced to each other. I think that see, my grandfather. Let's go back a little bit. My grandfather owned a lumber yard. My grandpa Kibort owned a lumber yard, and that was in Russia. And as you know, I'm sure that after during the First World War, when the Germans were fighting the Russians, and naturally they took everything away. They took everything away from the Jewish people. They lost their lumber yard, and then after the war, they had to start all over again, which was very difficult. My father, and my uncle Yitzchak, they had to start all over again. So they got into the businesses like the leather store and other things. And I understand they were introduced by somebody, and then they got married, and things were going pretty well.
Did Bobby have any siblings?
Yes, my mother had two brothers, and the two of them ended up in Russia.
And what were their names?
One was Nehemiah, and the other one I really can't remember his name, because they were not. I have never seen them because they moved away to Russia. See, and
you said you lived upper middle class.
yeah,
Sure.
and I remember a lot of the schools, and it seemed like that's what I enjoy most is being around my friends, and we spend a lot of time. We spent at the community center at the Maccabi place, and I remember going to synagogue with my father on Saturdays. There were quite a few synagogues in Shoah. Like there was a Bet HaMidrash HaGadol, and we belonged to a nice synagogue. And so those are the things I do remember. I remember at Pesach, playing with the kids and doing things around the synagogue. And then
What was your house like?
well, we at one time we had a nice home, and we were not too far from our store. And I remember that house, and I was very little then. And then my father bought a beautiful home, which you could see in the picture before, and he bought it from a senator. And that was really a gorgeous home. We lived right next to a park, and I really enjoyed it. But unfortunately, we weren't there long enough, because this is when things start going sour and the Germans start coming in.
Do you remember the address or anything?
Yes, it's Vaisių Gatvė 16. Now, Gatvė is a street. In Lithuania, it's a street. 16, and it was right next to a park. And I really enjoyed it a lot.
Do you remember the address of the first home too?
It was on Varpo Gatvė. Varpo, B-A-R-P-O. And that's where most of the stores, different stores like our store, and there were cigar stores and all kinds of head makers and all kinds of things.
Do you remember how you celebrated particular Jewish holidays? Do you have memories?
Well, we had, it was not, the celebrations were not like here, like a Seder was not like we have a Seder. It was just our immediate family and had the dinner, and my father made a kiddush. And of course everything was kosher, there wasn't anything else. I mean, all the butchers, all the meats, everything was kosher. And we used to sing a little bit, and I remember when my father used to come home after his business hours, we used to sit around the table and have dinner, and we did it. I remember that very well, and this was really our enjoyment.
Do you remember any special foods that your mother made?
Well, my mother made pacha. My mother made baked kichel. My mother was not the greatest cook, but I must say that. But we had just like any other family, like kugel and latkes and all of that stuff.
What was the first one you mentioned? Pacha?
Pacha.
What is that?
Well, pacha is a I don't know. I can't explain it to you. It's just that you'll have to talk to Riva. She'll explain that. And then I remember my bar mitzvah. Okay, and it was in 1939, and it was not a great big party, but I had a special teacher like we have here, and he taught me the bar mitzvah, and then I remember going to shul and doing the Torah and the whole thing, and then we came home and my mother had a nice luncheon, and my uncles and aunties. And my uncles and aunties came over and we had a nice luncheon, and that was very meaningful to me. And then my uncle gave me a present, a nice watch that I remember. And my father, Alav Sholem, bought me a bicycle. And I even remember the name of the bicycle, the Sierra Nevada. And the bicycle was imported from Germany because there was no such a thing as making those type of things in Lithuania, so everything was imported. So that bicycle I'll never forget. It was a great thing because not too many kids had bicycles in those days, and I really adored it. And but unfortunately, I did not have the bike long enough, because a year later, or a year and a half later, no, let's stop a little bit. The Russians took over Lithuania. There was a pact between Russia and Germany, and apparently the Russians took over Lithuania. When the Russians came into Lithuania, they took away everything, all the stores, anything that anybody had, to important business places. It was confiscated. The Russian government took everything away.
Just the Jews or all of them?
No, everybody. No. There was no difference whether you were Jewish or Gentile. Everything was taken away from you. This is when my father lost his store. This is where he lost everything. And being that he owned the store, he was made the shipping clerk. And the shipping clerk at that store was the manager at that store. And this is how the Russians were running things. And this was going on for about a year. And during that year, at one time, the Russians were shifting around their population. They tried to bring in Russian people to Lithuania and people from Lithuania towards Russia. And we were all packed up. We thought they'll come in some night and just take us and into Russia. So we were all packed up and ready to go. And it did not happen. And then the war broke out between Russia and Germany, and the Germans pushed the Russians back, and they took over Lithuania. Well, then when everything started going sour, they number one, all the Jewish people had to put in a yellow star. They took everything away. And at first they called in like anybody that had a radio. We had a beautiful Telefunken radio that I can remember. We used to sit and listen to the news and listen to music, and we had to turn in this beautiful radio. Those are things that's outstanding that I will always remember. Then, of course, I had to turn in my bicycle because it was not allowed. All the Jewish people had to turn in radios, bicycles, or anything. They had gold pieces, whatever. So we turned in the bicycle, and things start to go slowly. Now I'm going back a little bit. I'm a little bit ahead of myself. When the Germans start coming in Lithuania, in Shoah, we did not know what to do because we knew there's going to be a lot of trouble for the Jewish people because, we're reading the papers and through the news that they are terrible. It's going to be tough for the Jewish people. So my father had a very good friend that was in the grain business, and he had a truck, and he told my father we should get out of Shoah. We should try to go towards Russia, towards the Russian border. Maybe we can escape. Maybe we'll get away till the thing will blow over and things are going to be better. So we took the most important things from our house and we put it on this truck, and we went to, being that he knew so many farmers in the grain business, so he used to deal with those people a lot, and we got to one farmer, and unfortunately things had changed. He says, I don't want you because you are Jewish. I don't want you. And just to make a remark, the Lithuanians were terribly anti-Semitic. I mean, they were taught in their schools and in their churches that the Jewish people killed Jesus Christ, and we were their enemies. So when the Germans came in, he said, no, we don't want you. So then we tried a different farmer, and pretty much the same story. We were going to 3-4 different farmers. It was pretty much the same. So at that time, my brother Leo said he's going to run. He's going to run towards Russia. He says, we got to get out of here. So I started crying, and I said, no, you can't go. And I grabbed him by his leg, and I wouldn't let him go. And being that there was no place for us to go, all the doors were closed. So we said, we'll go back to Shoah again. So we came back to Shoah, and as we're going through one of the main streets, and here everything is just jammed with the military, with Germans, the Gestapo guys and the military guys with their beautiful uniforms, and we were just shaky because we thought that they're looking at us, they know we were Jewish, and boy, that's going to be the end. And we finally got back to our house, and when we got back to the house, our house was taken over by the German commandos. This big house. They made it their headquarters, or some of their lieutenants or higher-ups were in that house. So we could not get into that house, but fortunately we had there was a separate house on the side for the kind that was built for the help, for the maid, for the gardeners, and we did not have a maid or a gardener, but that house was standing there. So the Germans said, you can go in, you can move into that house. And this is what we did. We moved into that house. That house was guarded they had a guard at a gate. As I said before, that house was right by a city park. So the back was all blocked off with a gate. And the front was also with a nice little gate. And they had a military man, a German military guy, stand at the gate. And when we came back, well, he found out, we spoke a little German, we told him this is our home. He said, well, we'll open up this small house for you, and they did. And this is where we moved in. They had set up a military kitchen in the backyard, and it was just like a military outpost, and we were just in that place. They let us stay there. And second night, the Lithuanian police had orders from the Germans that they can go to all the Jewish homes and take away the man, anybody they want, men only, and take him to the city jail. And they, of course, they did it with open arms, because as I mentioned before, and this should be on record, that those were the biggest anti-Semites in the world. And so they came to our house, to our home, to arrest us, to take out my father and Leo, and probably me too. I was a little kid yet.
How old was Uncle Leo at this point?
Well, my Leo is 6.5 years older than I am. So he was, when the Germans came in, it was like 1 year after my bar mitzvah. I was like 14 and a half, and Leo was in the 20s. So fortunately, when the Lithuanian police, when they came to the gate and they were going to round up all the Jewish people and get us, the German soldier, he couldn't understand what they were saying. And those dummies didn't know how to speak German. He didn't know how to speak Lithuanian, and he wouldn't let them go in. He said, you cannot go in. This is a military place. And they went back. In the morning, when we got up, we found the bad news that my uncle was taken away. One of my uncles, Uncle Leo, and they took him to jail. And during the night, they took him away in some forest, and they killed him. They shot at that night probably about between 50 to 75 Jewish men, and it was just too late. There's nothing could have been done. My auntie, his wife, she was a secretary of the bank, and she spoke a beautiful German, and she ran to the German headquarters. Apparently she knew some people there, and she said they arrested her husband at night, and is there any possibility to get him back? Well, they would have taken him out of there, the Germans, because they knew her, but it was too late. He was already shot.
And did they tell her then?
Well, they didn't tell her, but you could see what was going on. And then the second night, they used the same trick again. So my father said, well, here's what we have to do. Being that our house is right on the borderline with the city park, he said, I got a real heavy rope. When I remember this as a kid, it's a real heavy rope. And he said, we're going to lower it down, we're going to tighten it on the second floor to the window, and when they come, as soon as we hear they come to get us, we'll lower ourselves down and we'll lay there in the park so they won't get us. So we were all prepared for it. And so they came to the gate again the second night, and the same story again. The Germans would not let them go in. And this is how we survived. Because I would say maybe 75% of the Jewish men were taken away in those 2 nights. And that's how we escaped. Then about a week later, they had orders that all the Jewish people have to put on stars. You cannot walk on the regular sidewalks. You have to walk on the streets. And slowly they start taking things away from us.
How are you getting food at this point?
Well, food we could go to the stores and buy.
So they hadn't taken money away?
They hadn't taken money away, and we had no. That was really not a problem at that point. There was enough food, and you could go shopping and do things, but always with a yellow star and pointed out that you're a dirty Jew. And then they ordered us all. Okay, so then they ordered us all to go into a ghetto. They start explaining what they're going to take people out of their homes, and they have a whole section, a very poor part of the city. This is where they're going to have a ghetto. They're going to settle all of the Jewish people in that part of the city. And so before, and they said, well, we're going to get you guys like they had everything arranged like on a Tuesday, 10 families, on a Wednesday another 10 families. So everybody was crowding into the ghetto, and it was called the Kafkaza Ghetto. And so that night before they were going to take us to the ghetto, my father said, well, we have some gold pieces and rings and a few little diamonds or whatever my mother had, and every family had certain things, treasures. He said, I'm going to put it in a coffee can, and we'll bury it right in the back of our home in the park. And he dug a hole, and we were all standing around. He put it all in 2 coffee cans, and it was buried in the back of the house. He said, if we'll ever survive, if we'll come back, you guys know where this stuff is, we'll dig it out, and maybe that's going to help us. And they took us to the Kafkaza ghetto, and there were 3 families in like one room. So we built bunk beds, so otherwise it was so crowded, it was impossible. And that ghetto was right next to the city cemetery, to the Jewish cemetery. And so we were in the ghetto for a couple of years. A couple of years. And we all had jobs. I worked at a hospital and trying to keep the furnace going and cleaning up things, and then they moved us. Then I got a different job, assigned a different job, because the leather factory was right next to the ghetto, and so all they had to do is open the gates and march into that factory, and that's where we did slave labor, like unloading trucks and loading things and doing different things. And one day I got very sick, and apparently I picked up a diphtheria, and there was no medications in the ghetto. There was no way, you just die. So fortunately, they found somebody that worked in a hospital, and he found to give me a shot, a penicillin shot, and that cleared it up. So they smuggled it into the ghetto, otherwise I would have been dead. They had a little hospital there, and they took me to the hospital. And I survived.
At that point, how were you getting food and heat?
Well, in the ghetto, they opened up like kitchens, and there was enough food. Food was smuggled in. I mean, there was no luxury, let's put it this way. But anybody that had little money, they did not take our money away. Well, they wanted to take it away, but we were hiding it. And we had money, and with that money we used to buy food, and some food was smuggled into the ghetto.
For people that didn't have money, were they starving?
People that didn't have money was a lot more difficult, but there was a kitchen, and it was like a camp kitchen, and there was enough to eat. There was no starvation in our ghetto. Then basically there were two ghettos in Shoah. There was one ghetto, the Kafkaz ghetto, and then was another ghetto which is called the Traku ghetto. That ghetto was right next to the city jail. And like about maybe a year or 2 years after they took us to the first ghetto, they combined the two ghettos, and everybody ended up into the Traku ghetto. And we kept on working in that factory, and we tried, being that we lost, they took us out of the schools, there was no schooling anymore, they took all away from us, and so we tried to do some learning, some studying, so teachers set up some like a cheder, and we used to meet late in the evening and sit around and study, and they used to teach us things because they took us out of the schools. There was no education. I was going into my first year of high school when the whole thing happened. So we were studying, were always trying to learn and to do things. And a matter of fact, I was very active in school. I'm going to take back. I was very active in school. I used to play a lot of basketball. And in the ghetto, as little kids, we tried to set up a basket in some backyard. So we made it from around a barrel. They had a big ring. So we used to take off that ring and set it up as a basket and stand from far and make take a bunch of schmatters and make a football out of the schmatters and shoot baskets. And
So you played for the Shoah Lakers.
yeah, Shoah Lakers. And what was it now?
And you studied. You said you
Yeah,
played
we did.
basketball.
Yes, we did some studying.
There were no books, though, were there?
There were books, yes. Well, you used to. There were books, yes, and we did the best we could. They were very dedicated teachers, and they tried to get a bunch of kids, and so people could study a little bit. And
What language were you speaking with them?
speaking Yiddish,
In your house?
and in the house we spoke Yiddish.
And outside?
But we also, in school, we took Hebrew. Matter of fact, in Lithuania, we learned the modern Hebrew. So with Lithuanians, we spoke the Lithuanian language.
And then
But
you said
among ourselves, always Yiddish was the language.
And you said you picked up German too.
We spoke a little bit of German. We thought we spoke German, but German is so close to Yiddish, so kind of But we got it. We got by pretty good. And now in the ghetto, Leo, being that he had a trade, he learned a trade. He used to fix purses and make purses and billfolds and attaché cases. So the Germans, right next to the headquarters, they set up a shop, and they took some craftsmen, because there were some excellent Jewish craftsmen, artists and upholsterers and all kinds of people. So they set up a shop, and in that shop they had an artist, and Leo was the purse maker and suitcases and that type of stuff. And then they had all kinds of different craftsmen. The reason they did it, so they could make different things for them personally, and like Leo used to make them purses and things, and they used to send them to their wives, to their families into Germany. So being that Leo had I would say, an excellent job, because there was plenty of food, and they used to give them things, and they used to give them like cigarettes, and then we used to take the cigarettes into the ghetto and sell the cigarettes and buy food. So there was enormous help. And then Leo got me into that shop also, and I was helping them. We were making mattresses and everything for the Gestapo people, and so we kind of helped each other constantly. So we used to bring in the food for our parents, and things were going a little bit better for us in the ghetto. And one day, an experience. One day, as I walked out from the shop, and the shop, as I mentioned before, was right next to the German headquarters. And as I walked out from the shop, there was an elderly Lithuanian lady, and she said, "Would you like a bread? Would you like to buy a bread?" And well, naturally, we were always ready to get food because it was not plentiful. So I said yes, and so she said, "Well, why don't you step back on my house, and I'll get you a loaf of bread." I don't know whether she felt sorry for me, or I don't know if she tried to make $1 or whatever. And so I was going back to the back of her house, foolishly enough, and she got me the bread, and I got into the house, and it was a big porch, and she got me the bread, and as I was ready to walk out of the porch, the chief of the Gestapo, the SS was walking by, and he noticed at me with a Star of David, coming out of that house, and as soon as I spotted him, I ran back and I shoved the bread on the porch under a couch, and I shouldn't have done it, but I did. And as I was coming out, he said, "What did you do?" I said, "Nothing." And he found out I had a bread. Well, he took me up to the Gestapo headquarters. And there's a thing that I will never forget. And they, as I got into it, and he started telling him in German what he did, that the stupid Jew, or they used to say the Lausbub, the dirty Jew, he lied to me, and he slapped me over the face, and my glasses flew from one side to the other side, and here all the desk and all the Gestapo guys, and I was shaky, and believe it or not, I wetted my pants. I was so shaky, and I was so frightened, and then they all started screaming, and they kicked me around, and then they took me downstairs. They had a basement there, and I had to put your pants down and get over and lay on that chair, and the Gestapo guy, this great big animal, took a whip, and they were ready for those things, and I had to count, and I got 25 knocks, and I had to count them, and I screamed and I cried. Luckily, they would have taken me to the city jail and got rid of me, or maybe shot me right there on the spot. But they knew that I worked in the shop, and they knew that I was Leo's brother, and Leo made all those beautiful purses and things for them, for their families, for their wives, and they said, "You're lucky to get out of here," and they kicked me out of there. And I came back to the shop, and they knew already, Leo and the other guys, they knew there was something going on, because somebody spotted when they got me with that bread, and they already tried to negotiate with those guys and plead with them and beg them, so they released me, and I think that helped a lot too. To make a long story short, I came back, and that evening I came back to the ghetto, and I could not sit. I had to lay straight in bed, and I was bleeding from my rear end that you just can't believe. And this was one of the really toughest things that I ever had. Then also there's another thing where one morning we got up in the ghetto, and all of a sudden there were trucks, German military trucks, lined up outside the ghetto, outside the wired ghetto, blocks and blocks of trucks. And we knew there's going to be trouble. We knew there's something going on. And all of a sudden, instead of Lithuanian police, there were German Gestapo guys all around the ghetto. And one of the Gestapo guys was well known to be one of the top murderers. And he came from headquarters from Berlin. It so happened that Leo knew that guy because he too made some purses for him, for his wife.
Do you remember his name?
I can't remember. I really can't remember the name. And he was at that gate, and they said, everybody that's going all the laborers, anybody that's going out to work, the gates, they open the gates and you just go, to your places, like into the factory, into the different places, and all the old people, women, older people, crippled, children were naturally left in the ghetto. So what they tried to do, anybody that had a job, anybody that was capable, able to work, would get out of the ghetto. Everybody else would stay in the ghetto. So, for some reason, Leo figured, well, there's trouble, and we discussed it right away. My father and Leo and myself, we said, there's going to be big trouble here. We got to get mother out of here. So Leo went back to the house, and he said to my mother, he said, get dressed immediately. He said, put on your coat. She had a scarf. He took the scarf off so she wouldn't look old. And because see, when they could see older people coming out, they pushed them back. They wouldn't let them go. So he said, get dressed right away, we got to go. And she got dressed, and she went out with us. As we got to the gate, they kind of looked at people, could see anybody they don't want to go out. They want them in the ghetto. This particular Gestapo guy, I wish I could remember his name. He looked at my mother, and he was ready to push her back. And Leo put his arm around my mother, and he let her go through because of Leo. We got out of the ghetto, and we worked all day. In the evening we came back to the ghetto. There was nothing there. There was absolutely nothing. There were no people in the ghetto. They took away all the children. They took away all the old people. They took away all the crippled people. They put them in the trucks. They took them to the depot, into the boxcars, and into the gas chambers and crematoriums. At that point, we heard that they were taking the Jewish people away into the gas chambers.
So you had heard
into the
about gas chambers
crematoria.
at that point?
I beg your pardon?
You did hear about gas chambers at that point?
Oh yeah, we heard about it. But see, we heard about it, but at times you don't want to believe. You say, see, they desire to stay alive is so powerful, it's so strong that you don't want to believe it. But we heard about it, yes. And this is what it took on. And this is where I lost my auntie. And my uncle's wife and the two children were taken away. My auntie Bella was taken away. And when we came back to the ghetto, my uncle comes home and nobody there. Okay, and then anybody that survived this particular deal, life was going on. We tried to organize things to resist the Germans. We tried. As a matter of fact, as young as I was, they had meetings and say, well, we can get some pistols, some guns. And they showed us how to handle it, how to use it, in case there's problems. There were just a few smuggled in, a few to the ghetto. And but there was one problem in Lithuania, or many problems. One of the problems, the population, and I think this is very important, so that stays on forever. The population in Lithuania, they were the biggest, as I mentioned a couple of times before, they were murderers. They were Jew haters. And there was no place to go. There was no escape. You can go, like they say in Yiddish, from fire and Wasser. You run out of the fire, you want to run into the water. You run out of the water, you run into the fire. There was no place to go. You can't escape. Nobody wants you. There was no place to go. This is why there wasn't that much resistance. Our hands were tied. You could not run any place. If you run out, if you escape the ghetto, let's say we could escape the ghetto, you can handle it. You dig it under, you can escape it. But where do you go? You'll come to their homes, they won't let you come in. You Jew, you dirty Jew, you go back. We don't want you.
Did you have the option of pretending that you were Jewish?
There was no way, because everybody pointed out, everybody knew that you were a Jew. I mean, it's you know, for some reason, we were recognized immediately. Number one, the stars, well, sure you could get rid of the star, but everybody knew who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. And going back a little bit, just to tell you a little bit more about the Lithuanians, I think that's very important, that they used to have football games. And that's going back before the ghetto. There was a Maccabi, and they used to have tournaments. Like one Maccabi was playing the other Maccabi from one city, from Kovna or Shavel or those places. And then they played the Maccabi played some Lithuanian teams, and we all used to go to the games. We all used to go to the games, and after the games, when the Maccabi won the game, there used to be riots in town. They used to throw stones and do all kinds of things against the dirty Jew. So there was a horrible population. They were just miserable. Going back to the ghetto, in one thing that I do remember in the ghetto, one of the men was coming into the ghetto after work, and they found a slice of salami. He had some salami hidden under his shirt. He was going to bring it back to his family. He was a family man. He had a wife and 2 or 3 children. And as he was coming into the ghetto, coming through the gate, the German policeman, the German Gestapo guy, they checked him and they found the salami on him. Well, right away they took him to jail. They took him to the jail. For bringing in food into the ghetto was not allowed. And the Gestapo, when they found out about it, so they make a big issue out of it. And at the Gestapo headquarters, the head of the Gestapo, he wanted to make himself a big macher, a big name, so he was tough. He was tough on the Jews. So they ordered to build in the ghetto a gallows, to hang that man. And it was ordered that it's going to happen on Saturday, like on Sunday morning. The whole population, the whole ghetto, everybody has to come out and stand in this big marketplace with a sting in the middle, with a rope hanging down, and they got him out of the jail, with his arms locked behind his back, and we were all standing, and his family, his wife, and the children had to be right there when he was hung, right in front of everybody. And there was a thing that I'll never forget. It's going to be with me forever.
Do you remember the names of any?
Well,
of
this
the
guy,
German-
his name was just said was Mazhevetsky.
Any of the Germans?
Well, the head of the Gestapo guy, his name was Bube. And as a matter of fact, Leo, being that he worked right next to the headquarters, he knew all of those guys. They set up a committee of 3-4 Jewish guys, and Leo was one of them. And they went to plead with the guy, please don't do it. The man has a family. We'll do everything possible for you. Please don't do it. And they did not help. It just did not help. And we were in the ghetto. Then the Russians started to push the Germans back. Things weren't going good for the Germans. That was in 1943, and the Americans on the other side were kind of circling the Germans, and things were going bad for them. So they liquidated the ghetto. They liquidated a ghetto end of 1943. So they announced that the ghetto is going to be liquidated, and they're going to take us into labor camps into Germany. There were rumors. Nobody told us anything. They did not have to tell us anything. They didn't care to tell us anything. But the rumors were that they're going to take us into labor camps towards Germany. To go back again in the ghetto, they had different orders. Where one morning they have to take, let's say, like 200 children. They have to take out of the ghetto. They had to take them to. They're going to take them to different schools. Those were the orders in the ghetto. And they set up a committee. There was the elderly at the ghetto, and they got orders from the Germans what to do. And they ordered 200 children to be taken away into they said to different camps. And one of the elderly, by the name of, his name was Cartoon, fine gentleman, and he said he wants to go see where the children are taken. So the Gestapo guy said, that's okay, you can go with them. So they picked 3 guys to go with the children. Well, you can imagine what happened. Those guys never came back, and the children never came back. And they took them to gas chambers. Going back a little bit into the ghetto, I'm backing up again because it's really difficult to remember. In the ghetto, they set up our own police, like Jewish people were picked as policemen. They call them more or less like capos. They got orders from the Germans, and they were doing all the dirty things for the Germans. There were some good ones, there were some bad ones. Most of them were good. And they used to tell people ahead of time, hey, you better be careful. Tomorrow we're going to take away so many people. There were different things going on. They used to tell us ahead of time.
So they made the Jews pick who was going to go on the transports?
Sure. That's right. They said we have to have like 200 people you have to bring tomorrow morning. And they had to do it. They had to do it. And now we're going, now they have orders, they're going to liquidate the ghetto, and it's going to happen on such a day, and you take certain things with you.
What were you allowed to take with you?
We're allowed to take whatever, like clothes, whatever you had, as much as you can carry with you. So put us on trucks and took us to the depot, got us into boxcars. There must have been, I can't remember exactly, but probably maybe 20, 30, maybe 40 people in a boxcar. They gave us a pail of water, and very little food, cramped, the smell was horrible. They took us to Riga, which was another ghetto, and they from Riga, Latvian, Jews from Latvia, and they put us on the same train and then they took us towards Germany. We didn't know the destination. They just told us they're taking us to labor camps, and we heard a little bit that things are going bad for the Germans. And the journey was about 2-3 days, going day and night. At one point, as the train pulled in to, I believe it was Königsberg, Germany, and they stopped the train, and the military were in the back of the train and in the front of the train. At Königsberg, they stopped the train, and they had sirens going. The Russians were bombarding the city of Königsberg, and naturally they wouldn't let us out of the boxcars. So the Germans, one of the Gestapo guys, they ran away to hide in bunkers from the bombarding. And and we were in the boxcars because we didn't care one way or another. I mean, our lives weren't worth a nickel anyhow, and we didn't care. We were kind of looking forward, so they would bombard, they would do things, so we get tough on the Germans. And they did not. They were bombarding the city and around the depot. For some reason, they did not bombard. They did not pinpoint the railroad station apparently. So then, when this thing was over, the Germans got back on the train and they got going again. Going back, there's one thing I forgot, and in the ghetto. Like I said, our ghetto was right next to this leather factory, and the Russians were bombarding the city of Shoah. But they did not want to destroy apparently that factory, and they knew probably there was a ghetto, and they did not want to destroy the ghetto for some reason. All of a sudden, one night, it was very dark, and we were just coming back. I know we had something going on, some kind of session, like I said before. We were studying a little bit, and we were walking back to our houses, and all of a sudden the sirens start going, and we see airplanes, and the sky was lit up like in the middle of the day. What they shoot out those I should say, just like a light.
Flares.
Yeah, and flares, and it was lit up like in the middle of the day, and it was so scary, and we just didn't know what happened. And all of a sudden we hear they were dropping bombs all around us, and there was a like a gutter, water running like a sewer, and I fell. I had like a little suit on, and I just got into the gutter because you try to find a low spot, and I lie down into the gutter, into the sewer water, and I head down, just to escape the bombs, and a bomb dropped right on the other side where I was lying, and it got in real deep into the ground because it was kind of a soft spot. Luckily, it was a soft spot, so it kind of buried itself into the ground and exploded. It exploded all over us, but it did not touch us. See, so it was a very frightening experience. And going back again, Leo got injured. They dropped a bomb, and a chunk of the metal got stuck in his leg, and he was injured. But it wasn't seriously. As a matter of fact, he still had a scar. But it wasn't seriously, and he escaped it. So now we're going back to the train into Germany, where they said they'd taken us to a labor camp. It took about 3 days and nights, and it was a horrible thing. I mean, there was horrible. The boxcars and the smell, and no food, and very little water, and it was a torture.
And this was winter?
It was a torture. It was winter. No, it was not winter. It was kind of no. It was about, I would say, maybe in August.
Oh, okay, so this was sort of August of 43, maybe?
43. Now, when I say August, I don't quite remember.
But it was still
not
hot.
winter. I don't think it was not. It was not cold.
So it was the end, but it wasn't the very end of 43.
No. They took us. Then finally we arrived. We didn't know where we were going, we finally arrived, the train pulled in to that camp. It was a concentration camp. We didn't know at that point what a concentration camp looks like. We heard about them, and as we arrived into that concentration camp, it was Stutthof concentration camp. Stutthof was one of the toughest, we found out afterwards, was one of the toughest concentration camps in the world. There wasn't another concentration camp like it. Nobody ever got out alive out of Stutthof. There wasn't such a thing until 1943. The concentration camp was built with human blood. They used to take in people into the concentration camp. They built a camp and they killed them in the camp. The only way to get out, the only way to survive that concentration camp was through the chimney. There was no escape, there was no way out. They had the biggest percentage of the prisoners in that camp were Jewish people. There were some priests. Anybody that resisted the Germans, they were put in that concentration camp. So when we pulled into the concentration camp, here the train stops, and then the Gestapo guys with the great big German shepherds were all over the place. They slammed the doors open and they start screaming, "You dirty Jews, get out!" And everybody starts schlepping, the little pekler that you had, a little suitcase, whatever, the schmatters, they were all half destroyed anyhow. And then the Gestapo guys were standing there with those uniforms, with the guns, with machine guns, with the dogs. I mean, it was the whole spiel, just like you see in the Schindler's List, just a replica. And we got out and they start pushing people around, and the Gestapo guys, one guy go right, one guy go left, women to one side, men to another side. We didn't know what the heck was going on. Finally, they got us to the side, and my father, Leo, my uncle, and myself. And we tried to stay to bunch together, not to separate. We were always afraid, and it was always in the back of my mind not to be separated, because I always thought, as long as we're going to be together, it'll be easier to survive. And then you have somebody to lean on. I mean, instead of being alone. Unfortunately, there were so many people all alone by then. They lost their parents, brothers, sisters. They were alone. So we tried to stay like a little unit. But you were afraid because they were constantly hitting you with the sticks, with the rifles, whatever they could. And they separated them. They took my mother away right away. She went with the women on one side, the men on the other side. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And then we were standing behind a barrack, and there were prisoners in the barrack. And they kind of opened the window a little bit, and they said, "You don't have to be afraid anymore. They don't kill anymore." Well, this was already end of 43. The Germans were afraid. They were concerned. Let's put it this way. I wouldn't say afraid. They were concerned. The Russians are pulling you from one side. The Americans were pulling the other side. At that point, they stopped the killings, but we didn't know. So the prisoners said, "You don't have to be afraid anymore." He said, "It's much better. It's much better now." Well, that was a relief, you can imagine. So then they marched us towards a great big barrack, and that's where they had the showers. They told us to undress completely naked, drop the clothes, the shoes, whatever you had on. At that point we had like little jackets or whatever, a shirt, undressed completely naked. We dropped it, and there was a great big pile of clothes and shoes. And everything had to be done fast. There was no way of thinking, there was no way of stopping. You moved because they hit you over the head constantly. You could not turn around. You turn around, you get hit with they clobber you. So we tried to stick together. We got undressed fast, and we ran, and they shoved us into the showers. Well, you can imagine when we got into the showers, our thoughts because we knew when you get into a shower that instead of water, the gas comes out. Well, it was some spiel, I can tell you. And finally, we turn on the water, and water is coming out. And when we see water coming out, it's just like there was a new life for us. We showered as quickly as possible, because there again, the Germans were, everything was in seconds. I mean, we were just like animals. And out you go, and they would not let you go find your own clothes. In other words, whatever you pick up, that's what you put on. And if you start looking for it, then they'll kick you. You have no time. So you grab. So a little guy grabbed a jacket from a guy that weighed 200 pounds. It was the most miserable thing that I've ever seen in my life. And then the terrible thing was shoes. I mean, one guy was a size 8, another guy a size 9, a size 10. You just grabbed a pair of shoes, and there was no time to exchange, and nobody wanted to exchange, and the Germans were all around you. So I grabbed a pair of shoes, and luckily it was a pretty good pair of shoes. I don't know who the shoes belonged to, but my father had a problem. He couldn't find a pair of shoes. And they gave him a pair of wooden shoes that they had for the prisoners. Okay, and so he put on a pair of shoes. There was wooden shoes, and it was horrible. And he couldn't walk on with them, and it drove us crazy. He was the only one that couldn't find his own shoes. He was just or a decent pair of shoes. It was horrible. Okay, then they took us into the barrack, and we got into the barrack, and then they assigned beds for every one of them. It was a bed. It was a like bunk beds. It was not none of them, just plain wood. And they shoved us in 3 in a bed. One guy stepped one way, the other guy the other way, his feet in my face, and 3 guys, and that was horrible. And then they assigned the capos. Capos were the police from the ghetto, and they were prisoners, and they were murderers. They killed people, and that's why they arrested them, and they made them the big shots in the camp. So you can imagine who you had to deal with. Those were the capos, and they just wouldn't leave us alone. Then they came in. Then we kind of talked at night, see what's going to happen to us, and then they heard us talk, and then they came in. And they were hitting us. We didn't know what's going on. It was miserable. And then they woke us up like 5 o'clock in the morning. Everybody comes out, and then you stand out early in the morning. You freeze to death, and you stand in line, and they call you numbers. We all had numbers.
Do you remember what your number was?
I can't remember my number, no. And they all had, and they called our numbers, and they had to say yes, and they knew how many people, and then they split us up through the day to go to work, to do different things, dig ditches or whatever, labor, hard labor. And then one morning, they got us up about 4 o'clock in the morning, out. And got out. They counted, there must have been about maybe 200 of us. And they say march, 5 in a line. And there again, we started to stay together, my father and Leo and my uncle and myself. I kind of always watched out for my uncle. And we marched towards the crematorium. Well, we didn't know, because we marched for about 15-20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, we see the chimney, the enormous chimney. And a matter of fact, up to this day, when I drive by, I never told you guys about it. When I drive by a factory, or like say Mount Sinai Hospital has the big chimney, that always comes back to me. So when they marched us towards the crematoria, towards the crest chambers, all of a sudden we could see the chimney. And people got panicky. And we start, and people start crying, and people start davening, praying. And we say they're taking us to that's the death march. They're taking us to get rid of us. And we kept on marching and marching and marching towards the crematorium. And we got like about maybe a block and a half or so. And then the guy said, turn left. And you can imagine the relief when they said to us, turn left. And then they took us to unload some military boxcars. They were bringing things back from the front lines, like paint, shoes, and bullets, whatever, really heavy boxes we had to unload. And I must tell you that little story, which, as we were unloading the boxcars, and there were Gestapo guys all over the place watching us. As we were unloading the boxcars, I noticed in one car they had cases with shoes, brand new military shoes with the spikes, like the military guys. And I must have been then about maybe 17 years old. And I kind of spotted the brand new shoes. And I say, if I could get a pair of shoes out of that place for my father, it would be so much easier for him. I was a tough little kid, and I kind of looked around, and I couldn't see any guards. All of a sudden, I didn't see the Gestapo guys with those machine guns, because they were, the train, you could run in between the boxcars, and I couldn't see any capos, I couldn't see any Gestapo guys, and I figured I'll sneak up on that train and I'll grab a pair of shoes. Well, you can imagine I risked my life. I would have been shot right on the spot. I got into that car and I found a box of shoes, and I kind of tried to size up the size of shoe that my father wears. I wasn't looking for the width, I just wanted a pair of shoes that would fit my father. And I grabbed a pair of shoes, and I used my hand. There was a bucket of paint, a great big bucket of paint, right next to those shoes. And I figured if I'll take those brand new shoes and they'll catch me, it'll be murder. So I dunked the pair of shoes in the paint, and I smeared it up so they wouldn't look like new. And I got a pair of shoes, and my father was just a little further away. And I said to him, put on those shoes, get rid of your verkackte shoes. He put on this pair of shoes, and till he survived, he had this pair of shoes. And can you imagine, he went through the winter, and I think that saved his life. He was just, and I tell you, I just cannot forget this little thing. It was a big thing then. Well, anyhow, after this particular day, we were in in the Stutthof concentration camp about, I would say, about 3 weeks probably. And then, this was a horrible concentration camp.
Did you see your mother at all?
No, we didn't see. We didn't know what happened to my mother. We knew nothing about my mother. That was a horrible concentration camp. It was just the most miserable place that I had ever seen. I mean, they were just killing. The crematoria was not going anymore, but they were murdering people. They were just so tough. They were so tough. So I tried. So one day, and the food was like a small little slice of bread, and they gave us soup. The soup was, they used to take like grass and drop it in a plate of water and make soup out of it. So when they give you that type of soup, it made you run. We could not go into the bathrooms only a certain time, like 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, there was a certain time they would not allow you to walk into the bathrooms at different times. And if they catch you, it's murder. Well, I ate that soup and I had to run. I said, the hell with it, I'm going to run in there anyhow. I ran into the bathroom and went to the bathroom, and one of the capos, he got a hold of me, he caught me, he said, you cannot go here during the day. And he grabbed me out of there, and they had this great big oven, and they put my head into the oven, and with my rear end sticking out, and I got clobbered like you can't believe. That was a Studov.
And the capos did that.
Capo did it, yeah. Capo did it. Then finally they said, well, we're going to move you to a different concentration camp, to a different camp. And they took us again to the depot.
Before we leave this concentration camp, did you see people being murdered?
Not in not in Studov. Not in Studov.
You saw people being beaten, but not...
But not murdered. Not in Studov, no. They put us again like 5, 6 in line, and they said they were going to take us they're taking us to a different place. We didn't, at that point we didn't care, because, I probably weighed maybe 110 pounds, and we were all kind of falling apart. It was very difficult, very difficult. They walked us like 5, 6 in line, and we tried to stay, like I said before, my father, my uncle Leo, myself, always in one line. So all of a sudden, somebody ahead of us comes out at the line, or kicked out of the line, or fainted, or died, or whatever, so we had to catch up. So the guy if the line in front of you, there's a person missing, you have to step in. And the guy in back of you is taking step in our place. Well, it so happened that the line opened up in front of us, one person got out, and I didn't want to go into his place, because I was going to stay with my father, Leo, and my uncle. And there was a capo there. Matter of fact, I remember his name, Max. And he says, step in there. And I tried to get a guy in back of me, single people kind of, with no family. They would get ahead of me and take over that place, because we always knew that they split lines in certain places, like they may end up in different camps or in different places. You understand what I'm saying? So I didn't want to step in the front line, and this Max, this Gestapo guy, had like a baseball bat, and he hit me on the side of my neck, and let me tell you, it was really something. I will never forget it. Well, I stepped over in the next lane fast, and the guy in back of me stepped in my lane, and then as we were walking, we switched. So we used our heads. We tried to hang around in one place, and put us back on the trains, and then going towards Germany. We didn't know where we were going. Finally, after I think a night, we got into they took us to a labor camp, and it was labor camp. It was a satellite camp from the Dachau concentration camp, and it was camp number 10. They had the Dachau concentration camp. Dachau was the main concentration camp, and they had a bunch of satellite camps, like I say maybe 15, 16 of them. We were in number 10. The camp was in Utting in Germany, not far from Munich. Camp number 10, and they took us to that camp and got us out. How we got from the depot to the camp, I don't remember, but I would say probably by trucks, by military trucks, but I cannot remember. But when they got us to that camp, there was basically nothing in that camp, and there was SS Gestapo guys, elderly people, because the young people they kept at that point in the front lines. There were elderly people in the 60s, maybe in the 70s, and they were not as harsh. They were more, I would say, nicer, because they worried about their own lives. They worried about their own families, so they gave you a little bit more time. The head man of that camp, this Gestapo guy, I would say the guy was 70 years old. And he was kind of the greeting committee as we all arrived. And there was nothing. There was just absolutely nothing. There was a meadow. It was just empty place. And he said, "You're going to build your own camp." This Gestapo guy said. But in the meantime, everyone were coming in. We had no food. We had no water. We were so thirsty. It was unbelievable. And we tried like animals. We tried to find, there was no water. He said, "You're going to have water." So they were bringing in cans and I don't know what. And we started drinking the water just like animals. We were so thirsty from traveling, from being schlepped 2 nights or days. So we drank that water, and the same time. No, that was a little later. So anyhow, he said, "You're going to build your own camp here," and they had lumber, and they had shovels and everything else, and we started working, and we built our own barracks, and the barracks were it was flush with the ground, and just like a little roof, like a triangle. We built it in with an entrance to kind of go down, like a step down, and that's how you walk in. And this was our home. It was right there, maybe like 20 people into a barrack. I don't remember. And there again, my uncle, my father, and Leo, all in the same barrack. We tried because we were standing in the same line, and and then we built the barracks. It took us weeks. I don't know how long. With the showers, with all that stuff separately.
What
And
months were these?
What month?
Or season?
There was already probably by that time. Yeah, it was end of beginning of 44, probably end of 43. Luckily enough, this labor camp was one of the best camps in the group. We found it out afterward. In some of the camps, people didn't survive again. We worked hard, we suffered, but it wasn't in comparison. It was not quite as bad as some of the other camps. We were fortunate. At that point, we were fortunate to get into this particular camp. We built a camp, and then our job was to build concrete blocks, walls for the military. They used to haul them away and build the military camps, and this was our job. Pour concrete and build and do things. And about a week later, after we were in that camp for about a week, all of a sudden a bunch of Gestapo guys show up. And would you believe it? That guy, that murderer, that SS man, that was standing at the gate in the shovel ghetto, came to that camp as a what do you call it? They were traveling to all these different camps. They came from headquarters from Berlin probably. Here was the same murderer again, the same one when Leo snuck my mother through that gate. He recognized Leo. Would you believe this? From Lithuania into Germany, into that camp, he recognized Leo. And he said, the Taschenmacher, what a Taschenmacher is, the guy that made the purses. He says, here's the Taschenmacher. And he called over the head of the Gestapo guy, and he told him to be a little bit more gentle on Leo and me. And they got me a job where people were working, in slave labor, snapping and doing things. They got me the job to clean up the barrack for the head man of the camp, the Gestapo guy. And Leo got a job to clean up the barracks for the Gestapo, the SS. So we had exceptional jobs. Every morning, like 7 o'clock in the morning, we just walked through the gate to their homes. Well, their homes were built out of the concrete blocks, and it was just like 3-4 blocks away. nicely decorated. You know, they lived pretty good. The military had lousy barracks, but the Gestapo guys had beautiful. And my job was to work for this guy Ripplinger. His name was Ripplinger. He was the head of the camp, a young man, tough. And he used to call me, and he kind of, I wouldn't say liked me, but he related maybe to some of the German kids, or maybe some of his nieces and nephews, I don't know. He kind of treated me a little bit better, and he called me the Benjamin. Benjamin, that's how he called me. Come here, Benjamin. Come on over here, Benjamin. Clean up this here. And I was, you know, I used to clean up his home. I used to make his bed. I used to schlep things for him. I used to work in the garden for him. This was my job. And I used to get the food from him, you know, like slices of bread, and I was not hungry. So the food that I used to get in the camp, I used to give to my father and my uncle.
And were they still working concrete?
They were working concrete, and they were working, but the food that was assigned for me and for Leo, we gave it to my father and my uncle. And that's how my uncle and my father survived.
And this Whipplinger treated you pretty well. Did he ever get angry with you?
No,
or-
he treated me very well. The way things were going,
Right.
he treated me very well. Yes, but I made a mistake. I was working for this guy for about 6 months. I was a tough kid, and I thought I had everything going for myself. I mean, comparing how everybody else were doing, and being that my father was fed, and my uncle, and we knew there were things were going on. The Americans were coming in, closing in, and because one of the guards, an older man, told us, Benjamin, it's not going to be very long anymore.
One of the Germans told you?
One of the Germans, the guy was in the 70s, Hefele was his name, Hefele, I can still remember that. And he said, it's not going to be very long, it's not going to be very long, you guys are going to survive. But I made a very bad mistake. The BBC radio from London, there used to be news constantly, every half an hour. This Gestapo guy, this Ripplinger, had this great big radio, and he used to listen to the news. I made a mistake. I was sneaking behind the door. Instead of working in the yard, I was standing behind the door, and I wanted to listen to the news, to the BBC news. And as I was standing behind the door, listening to the news, he opened the door fast, and he caught me behind the door. And he said, what are you doing here, Benjamin? So I didn't know what to say. I said, I was trying to get back or whatever. He said, I know, you were listening to the news. And this was not allowed. I mean, there was a no-no. I lost my job. I lost my job. He kicked me out. And also before that happened, I got to tell you one more story. As I was working in the yard, now you know where I like to cut grass. I was working in the yards. And I was working in the yard, digging, doing things. All of a sudden I hear an enormous scream. And I look around, and here are the German shepherds with two German Gestapo guys. They were dragging a guy, and the dogs were nibbling, biting on this guy, and tearing him to pieces. And I looked around. I was afraid to move, and I looked around, and here's a guy that used to be the shipping clerk for my father in the store. His name was Josip. They dragged him over in the backyard, right where I was working. And he wasn't much alive anymore because they beat him up to pieces. And this Ripplinger, that I will never forget. The few good things that he always did for me and treated me a little bit better than anybody else, but I'll never forget it. He took out a pistol and shot him. Shot him right in the head in front of me. That was before he kicked me out. He kicked me out, and then they put me like everybody else, walking out every morning, digging ditches, building those concrete blocks. And a terrible thing happened also in that camp. One of my teachers, from 6th grade or whatever, he died. Couldn't survive. And, it was a bad day. We were in that camp until in the 44 into 45, and in April of 1945 they said that they're going to take us back, they're going to liquidate the camp. They said, there was rumors, I mean, they didn't have to tell us anything, we were just like a bunch of animals, prisoners, we knew nothing. They were going to take us back to the main Dachau concentration camp. They marched, got us out of the camp, we marched towards Dachau. It was end of April, towards the end of April. We marched towards Dachau, we marched day and night. The weather was horrible. It was kind of raining and snowing a little bit. And it was terrible. We had blankets over us, old blankets, very little food. At that time I probably weighed maybe 95 pounds. It was terrible. And they got us to the Dachau concentration camp. We marched into Dachau concentration camp, put us in new barracks again. They gave us blankets. They gave us those striped uniforms, those long jackets with our numbers, with our signia, the whole deal. And slept over in Dachau the one night. When we walked out in the morning, there were dead people laid out all over the place. Anybody that died, that didn't survive during that night. So it happened every single day, every single night. I mean, it was a daily thing. They schlepped them out, put them out on the sidewalk, on the street, in the camp. Threw blankets over them or whatever. And then a truck used to go by, and prisoners used to take those guys, just like you pick up garbage. And picked up those people, threw them on the truck, and take them out to burn them, to bury them, whatever. And we got up in that morning, and there were loads of people all over the place, dead people, just laying there, skeletons. That day, late in the afternoon, they had this enormous kitchen there, and everybody was standing in line and trying to get little food. Well, it so happened that day, we had a pretty decent food. They too were afraid, because they knew the war is ending. They knew the Americans are coming. They knew that the Russians are closing in from the other side. So they were worried about it, naturally, for their own lives. So they gave us some, what I mean by better food, a thicker slice of bread, a heavier soup, a little bit more soup, a little bit more things. Then, all of a sudden, they give out packages. They got packages from the Red Cross. That's the first time they ever allowed it. Apparently they used to get food from the Red Cross, but they said they'd given it to the prisoners, and they never did. But that day they did. And they got us a can of meat, which we haven't seen for years, and a loaf of bread, the military bread, kind of this. I can still say it. I used to say all the time, and I think we all did. We hope that the day will ever come that we'll be able to slice a slice of bread, of a loaf of bread, because we haven't seen that loaf of bread. They used to give us thin little slices of bread. Well, that day they gave us all like a half a loaf of bread, the military bread. And we all had those striped uniforms. And I got the can of meat, and Leo got a can of meat, and my uncle got a can of meat, and my father got a can of meat, and a half a loaf of bread. All of, you can imagine, you get this, it's like you won the lottery. I mean, it's something that we haven't seen for years. And my father took the can of meat and put it in his back pocket. And it didn't take more than 2 minutes. I said, don't keep it in the back pocket, because there were thieves in that camp. I mean, there were all kinds of people. I said, don't keep the meat in your back pocket. He didn't listen to me. He kept it in the back pocket. It didn't take more than 2 seconds. The can of meat was gone. That's like your life, your fortune. I said, why did you do it? I begged you, don't keep the meat in your back pocket. But they did. They sliced it off with a blade, apparently, and they took it off. So, but I had a can of meat, and Leo had a can of meat, so we shared.
Were you with your uncle at
We
that
shared.
point?
Oh, I wouldn't leave my uncle alone.
So the four of you shared the food.
We shared the food.
Now I have a quick question with the cans, because we talked about this with the Mandelbaums. How did you open the cans of meat?
Well, those cans were sent from processed in the United States, and it had that little twist on the top of the can, and we twisted it open. I mean, it had an opener on it. You understand? Unless you break it, then you have a heck of a time. But we were very careful, and we all shared. And we were in the same night. They gave us all blankets and new jackets. And they marched us out you go. And they thought they will march us out at a Dachau concentration camp, and they'll take us into towards Italy, into the mountains, into the Alps, and get rid of us. They had no intention for us to survive. Their intention was for us to get rid of us, to liquidate us. We were a liability at that point. We were no asset to them. I mean, we were not strong enough to work anymore. We were just a liability. So they thought their idea was, and their command and their orders were to take us towards Italy and get rid of us in the mountains, in the Alps, someplace where it'll be. So we couldn't escape. Well, they marched us out. I got to track back once at camp number 10, when I worked for those military guys, and one of the older guys, this Heffley, I said, if you could borrow me a blade, I want to shave. We were just, nobody shaved. I mean, he said, so he gave me a blade. He gave me a shaver, kind of, to shave. And I took it to the camp, and I shaved, and that guy, the next day, he told me, he says, I couldn't sleep a whole night. He thought I was going to take the blade and commit suicide. I mean, that's interesting. I think that's an interesting story, that this old German, this guard was worried that I will commit, that this little Benjamin was going to commit suicide. Now we're going back. Out we go from Dachau. We marched from Dachau towards Munich. Or we didn't know where we were going. And like I said, the weather was horrible. When we got, they took us around Munich, and we walked the day, we walked the night, and there was a miserable thing, because what we had to do, we had to schlep. They had a little cart, and we had to push the cart, and the German soldiers, they had all their belongings, all their backpacks, whatever they had, they put on that cart, and we had to drag the cart like horses. So a couple of guys schlepped it, and a couple of guys pushed it, and then from the sides, we kind of helped along, and we had no koyach. I mean, we just We were worn out. And we keep on going day and night. Finally, at one point, I said to my father, I said, and Leo, and I said, that's it, I cannot do it anymore. I just can't. I was shivering at night, it was raining and snow, and I said, I just can't do it anymore. And we walked through this little town, I don't remember, Wolfertshausen or one of those towns, and it was a narrow street, and houses on either side, and I said, I'm going to escape, and I'm going to hide behind the houses, and if they catch me, whatever happens, forget it. I just can't do it anymore. I was shivering, I was cold, I was sick. And my father wouldn't let me. He said, no. He says, the end is coming shortly. He says, we'll make it. We'll make it. He says, you cannot go. And they put me between Leo and my father. And they dragged me. They dragged me. And we slept, and we got to this little town, and there was the ground. It was like a I don't know if you remember that we had the Vista playground where we used to live on Inglewood Avenue. There was a playground, and it's like built all around.
Almost like a pit?
Yeah, that's right. And you look down, and that's where they took us, so they can put all the military, all the machine guns and everything around from the top and get rid of us, shoot us all. That was the intentions of theirs. So as we got down, and in snow, in water, in dirt, and I was shivering, and my father and Leo, they put me between them. I was sick that night. And we just kind of huddled together with my uncle, and this is all I remember. And then all of a sudden, they told us to get out of there, to get up and get out of there. What happened, we found out afterwards. The mayor of that little town found out that the Germans were going to get rid of us in that little hall or whatever. And he was afraid. He said, if the Americans will come in here, and they're not far away, and they'll find out that those people were shot, that those people were killed here, they'll put the blame on our community. And he said, no way. If you want to get rid of it, not that he was such a beautiful man, but he says, if you want to get rid of them, you take them someplace else, but not here. And he saved our lives. And they told us to get out, and they put us, it was a farm community, and they put us in the barns. They split up, 5 guys, 10 guys, 20 guys into a barn. And there again, I got to tell you one more thing. As they marched us, on that march, a lot of people didn't survive. They just fell. When they fell and they couldn't move anymore, the German guys used to come with a revolver, give them a shot in the head, and then a truck used to follow, pick up the dead people, and take them away. So they got us into the barns, and we slept there, whatever, a whole night. It was, on the hay. It was a pleasure. You could see through the cracks, the outside, little barns. And it must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning. It was getting light. Dawn. It was just, and all of a sudden somebody stuck their nose out and they said, "There's no guard. There's no Germans." But we were afraid. We couldn't believe. I mean, you don't realize after all those years, all of a sudden there's no guard. Another guy snuck out. There's no guard. So we all got kind of anxious. We were young kids. I was 18 years old. And we snuck out, and then all of a sudden we see trucks, tanks, trucks, loads of military equipment, and a different uniform. No more the German uniform. And so we realized, I mean, after all, we were not dumb. We realized that the Germans are out. This is a different army. We didn't know it was an American army, it was an Italian army, it was a French army. Who knew about those uniforms? Soon enough, we found out the Americans, the 7th American Army, a unit of the 7th. So
Do you know what day that was?
there was the end of April. It was the 31st of April of 1945. That was a Liberation Day, and this young lieutenant came in, and handsome young man, must have been in the 20s, and he said, anybody speaks Yiddish? And he spoke a Yiddish, a real broken Yiddish, hardly, but at least he said a couple of things that we could understand. And he said, you have nothing to worry about anymore, you're liberated. He said, the only problem you people will have, the only problem you'll have if don't try to eat a lot. In other words, you were all worn out, and if you overeat, you're going to die. And he said there'll be plenty of food for you, but you got to take it easy. You're all going to be checked out by doctors, and you got to take it easy. And how do you take a bunch of animals and you tell them to take it easy when you're so hungry? So we grabbed food wherever we could. We found a dead horse right by that barn, and we chopped up that horse, and we made a fire, and we roasted, we baked, whatever we did with that horse, and we ate that horse, and that I remember. Then there was a bakery half a block away. We went to the bakery and we grabbed bread and whatever they had, and we kicked Germans out of there, and they knew there was a bunch of animals here, and then they took us to there was a Gestapo headquarters. That's where they trained all the Gestapo guys. That's where they trained all the SS. It was a gorgeous military place, and that was in the city of Botolz. This is basically where we were liberated, in Botolz. And they took us to their German headquarters because the place was empty, because where they trained all the Gestapo guys, all the military, the place was empty, but it was a gorgeous place. And they took us and they gave us rooms in that place, like 2-3 in a room. Well, let me tell you, we made a mess out of that place like you have never seen in your lives. I mean, we couldn't digest, we couldn't hold any food. It was the biggest mess in the corridors, in the hallways, all over the place. And then they sent in doctors, and our problem was just that we were like animals. We were grabbing food. We were stuffing ourselves. We were so hungry. And we were in that place for a short while, and then they took us, after being there for about a week or so, they took us to a displaced persons camp, Venlofing. And Venlofing was a short distance from Munich, maybe about 20 kilometers. It was a straight line by train to the city of Munich. They